Okay, let's get right into it. We're going to tackle a huge topic today, the massive gap between what we think our friends and peers are doing and what the real numbers actually show. Yep, it's all about perception versus reality.
I mean, seriously, have you ever had that feeling? That little voice in your head making you think you're the only one not doing something? It's such a common feeling, and today we're going to look at why that happens and, more importantly, what the truth really is.
So this is the key thing to wrap your head around. On one side, you've got perception, and that's built on stuff like your social media feed, rumors, just what you hear people saying. But on the other side, you have reality, the hard data, the research, the actual facts. And knowing how to tell the difference, that's like a superpower when it comes to making your own choices.
All right, so let's jump into our first section, perception versus the numbers. We're about to bust some of the biggest myths out there, and we're going to do it with cold, hard data.
Okay, first on the list is a big one, vaping. It can feel like it is absolutely everywhere, right? You see it online, you hear kids talking about it. So what do you think? What percentage of high schoolers are actually, currently, using e-cigarettes?
There you have it, just 7.8%. According to the CDC's latest data from 2024, that's the reality. For a lot of people, that number is way, way lower than they would have guessed.
And this chart just makes it so clear. I mean, look at that. That tiny little sliver represents the students who vape. The huge part, the other 92.2%, that's everybody else. Visually, you can see the vast majority are on the same page here.
Let's just reframe that for a second. It's not about the small percentage who do vape, it's about the overwhelming majority who don't. More than 9 out of every 10 of your peers are choosing not to. That's the real norm.
All right, let's cackle another one. You know that idea that by a certain age, everyone has tried alcohol? It's a classic line you see in movies, and it's a super common assumption. But is it actually true?
Not even close. The national data shows that about 32.9% of people between the ages of 12 and 20 have ever had at least one drink. So that's less than a third of people in that age group.
And again, this visual just flips the whole script. That bigger piece of the pie, the clear majority, represents teens who haven't tried alcohol. So not drinking isn't the exception, it's actually the standard.
Exactly. Just let that sink in for a minute. More than 2/3 of people your age haven't had a drink. That whole everyone is doing it line, it just completely falls apart when you look at the facts.
Okay, and now for maybe the most powerful myth of them all, the one that can create so much pressure, the idea that every other teen is sexually active. So let's see what the data actually says about that.
According to the CDC, the reality is that 32% of U.S. high school students have ever had sexual intercourse. Once again, what we think is happening is so different from what is actually happening.
And this chart just makes it undeniable. Look at that big 68% slice. It shows that the majority of high school students, that's more than 2 out of every 3, have not. So if you ever feel like you're the only one, well, the truth is, you're actually in the majority. So the numbers are pretty clear across the board, right? The big question is, why do we get it so wrong? This next section is all about the psychology behind these myths.
Well, it pretty much comes down to a few key things. First, social media just amplifies everything. People tend to post what they're doing, not what they're not doing. Also, risky behaviors are just more visible, so they seem more common than they are. And then you've got good old-fashioned rumors and our own brains working against us with something called confirmation bias, where we tend to look for proof that supports what we already believe.
Okay, so we know the facts and we've got some ideas about why we get them wrong. But, so what? Why does this actually matter? Well, because knowing the truth isn't just trivia, it's a tool. This section is about how these numbers can actually empower you. Here's the bottom line. When you know that everyone isn't actually doing it, that pressure just kind of melts away. It means you can make choices based on facts, not on some fictional story you've been told. This knowledge builds real confidence and lets you stand firm in your own decisions, whatever they happen to be.
So, how can you actually put all this into practice in your own life? In our final section, let's talk about how to see the reality with a simple guide for navigating all that pressure.
Okay, here's your game plan. First off, get curious. Look up the real data from sources you can trust, like the CDC. Next, talk to adults or friends you trust about this stuff. 3, actively challenge that everyone does it thought whenever it pops into your head.
4. Make your choices based on your values, not what you think the crowd wants. And finally, number 5, don't be afraid to share the facts. You might just change the whole conversation.
This quote just says it all, doesn't it? What we perceive feels incredibly real, and it can definitely influence our choices in a huge way. But just because something feels real doesn't mean it is. The data often tells a completely different and, frankly, a much more empowering story.
And that's really what it all comes down to. When you're armed with the facts, you get to be the author of your own story, guided by your own values. You don't have to follow some script written by rumors or social media hype. So the real question is, what will you choose to write?